monitor.
Okay. So I think the first question we thought of was, how would you define justice studies, like, as a major?
Well, how would I define justice studies? We are an interdisciplinary department to begin with. So that's one way that separates it from some of the other departments on campus. We have sociologists. I'm one of them. We've got political scientists. We've got legal scholars. So people from a lot of different disciplines teach in this department, which makes the kind of perspectives that we present in our classes a little bit varied, because we come from a couple of different perspectives. I would also say that unlike sociology, which is very scientific, looking at how things happen, justice studies is a little more critical and actually has a perspective of critiquing injustice, not just studying it and seeing that it exists, but there are a lot of activists in this department who take an active stand toward trying to end injustice. So that gives this department a little bit different flavor, I think.
That's a really good explanation. Okay, so another question we had was, how has your discipline changed within the past 10 years?
Geez, that is kind of interesting. One way it's changed is that the university has actually foisted some change on us. A couple of years ago, we actually took pretty much everything that had to do with criminal justice out of our department, and they created the Department of Criminal Justice on the West Campus. Mm-hmm. So one way it's changed is that our classes really don't deal almost at all with straightforward criminal justice. And so our students, I think, don't have a very good background in really understanding the workings of the police and crime and the courts and corrections, which is what we used to have some input in. So that's changed a little bit. I mean, whatever was there already is already still going. I mean, there's still a focus on juvenile justice and prisoners, and we've sort of leaned toward human rights. When we get new faculty members in, they bring their own kind of interest. So it's changed a little bit in that way. But really, we have very little talk of criminal justice, the process of criminal justice, or the system of criminal justice. I try to bring that into one of my classes, kind of a low-level, it's called Justice in Institutions. I teach online, where we at least do cover a couple of weeks of, policing and what constitutes crime and
kind of
how
like
the
what
courts
we did
work.
Today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was actually really nice what we did today. I found it interesting.
Thanks.
Okay, so what kind of arguments and evidence do you use when coming up with theories?
I'm not sure I know how to answer that question. I'm not a theorist. And actually I'm a sociologist, so my theoretical background is in social theory. This department really focuses on justice theory, so it's a little bit different. We kind of talk about Hobbes and who else? Have you taken justice theory?
No, I'm taking that next semester.
Okay. There's a whole bunch of people that are really focused on ideas of justice and theories of justice. Mm-hmm. Kind of not really my area. I am a sociologist. My theoretical perspective comes from sociology. I'm a symbolic interactionist. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my focus in the stuff that I teach, the classes that I create, and the perspective that I try to get my students to take really comes from a kind of a grounding in constructed reality and the way that human beings interact with each other.
Okay.
I guess that's coming up with new theories. I don't know about that. You'd have to talk to somebody who's, working in the area of theory.
Okay. Let me see. What are some sources that you feel are trustworthy and you base your thoughts on?
In terms of my teaching or my research?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I actually, I'm not quite sure how to answer that. Trustworthy sources, peer-reviewed journals are always a good place to begin. Mm-hmm. Because anything that gets published in a journal, in a periodical, an academic journal, really has to pass through a review board, and the review board they're made up of people who are experts in the field, who've been writing and publishing in that particular area. And they review everything that's submitted to the journals before they get published. So by the time it does end up in print, so that the rest of us can get it and cite it in our work. It's already gone through a gatekeeping process where everything has been sort of weighed. There have been lots of rewrites. There have been lots of different eyes on it to make sure that what's being said is, kind of fitting in the existing knowledge in that particular area. That's not to say that what gets printed is always 100% accurate and correct, because things change over time. But because there are gatekeepers, basically at the door of whatever gets published, it puts it through a rigorous process of scrutiny. So the stuff that gets published is pretty well researched and well grounded in empirical evidence. So I would say academic journals is a good source. Books can be published. Books may not go through the same kind of rigorous review process before they get published. I mean, they get edited and stuff, but the research and stuff may not be as rigorously reviewed. However, once a book is published, there are lots of scholars working in the field who will read that book and will write lots of book reviews. So when a book gets really well reviewed and is used in a lot of other citations, you pretty much can trust that that site has influenced a lot of the thinkers who are currently working on problems.
Okay, that's good. Has your discipline changed the way you view people?
Actually, yes. Coming from sociology, when I first started teaching in this department, I taught drugs and justice. I taught intro to criminal justice. I think those are the first courses I taught here. And I started getting increasingly depressed because the topic is, basically what we're doing is examining injustice mostly. And to kind of read about it and teach about it and show films about it, to just see the depth of inequality and injustice, it is kind of depressing after a while. And it's a little bit different from being in strictly a social science, because we in sociology, we might look at lots of different things, not necessarily with a critical eye, just to see what's what. In this department, they really look at, we're really focused on how injustice operates, and, the haves and the have-nots, the people with power against those who are powerless. And it's changed me. I've become a lot more cynical and a lot less, optimistic about some things. So.
Okay. What are current debates in your fields? And for that, I probably mean like in the field of justice studies.
Current topics. Part of what's good about this department is that it's also very topical. The activists are working on things that are issues right now. So you have people working on the DREAM Act and dealing with immigration, studying immigration, and speaking to groups about immigration and changing the laws, and we have people working on, I'm sure, the Second Amendment stuff. The Second Amendment stuff with guns and. What was the question again?
What are current debates in the field?
So the stuff that's going on, I don't know whether they would be debated within the department, but the department then kind of takes a position, especially the activists with in here. We're always thinking progressively. We're always interested in ending injustice and issues of fairness and equality. So a lot of our students, especially a lot of the more conservative students, think that this is like a liberal think tank. But I think that a lot of the people in the department that teach in the department would see themselves as working in the name of justice rather than picking in kind of a conservative or liberal side. And so whatever's happening in the culture, water rights, indigenous people's rights, rights of juveniles, the rising incarceration rates, drug laws, those are all the kind of things that our department is critical about. I mean, we take a very critical position on in working in terms of equality and not looking so much like an incarceration happy culture. So those kinds of things. I mean, that's what we've been doing for a long time. That's why this department kind of was created. To basically add a critical component to the other social, and political disciplines that are on campus here.
Okay. So another question is, what is your biggest accomplishment in your field of study?
That's an interesting question for me because I don't really publish. I don't have to publish as a lecturer. I'm hired as a lecturer. I teach a lot of students and I teach a lot of classes. So I would say, to answer your question, that my biggest accomplishment is continuing to teach and to reach. I probably teach more of our students, just in terms of sheer numbers, than anybody else in the department.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because my classes are big and I teach a lot of them. So there have been a lot of students that have been justice majors that come through the department that I've had in my classes. So I don't necessarily do a lot of research and publish. I have published and I do publish, but it's not really my focus. It's not what I'm hired to do. So I would just say kind of refining my teaching and developing some courses. Those have been the biggest accomplishments academically.
Okay. So that's the end for the questions on here. Did you guys have any questions?
That's it?
Right?
That was
Yeah.
easy.
That's good.
I had one more question.
Okay.
I'm a little bit confused. What did you get your degree in? Sociology?
Sociology.
Sociology. What made you want to get involved in justice studies and drugs and justice and stuff like that in this department?
You really want the truth?
Yes.
I graduated and was offered a job. One of my professors was actually teaching in this department and became the interim chair. Our chair moved on, and before they chose a new chair, which turned out to be Marie Provine, David Altidy was the interim chair. And I had just graduated in sociology, and they offered me a one-year lectureship position to teach drugs and justice. So I started teaching that class in 2001. And that class started, I think it was capped at 100 students. I taught it every other semester. And over the years, it went from 100 to 150 to 200. And now I teach it every semester. So I've been teaching that for 10 years, 11, no, what is this, 2013? Almost 12 years. But my position rolled over from a one-year position to a multi-year position now. So it's a 3-year rotating position. So that's been another one of my, I would say, accomplishments, was to be able to stick around and develop a lot of classes. So when they gave me that class, the teacher that was teaching it left, so they wanted to offer drugs and justice and offered it to me, which I didn't really know too much about at the time. And over the period of the last 12 years, I mean, I've learned an awful lot about drugs, much of that from my students, from the stuff that they share and their experiences. And directions that they've pushed me to investigate. So that's been a really interesting experience. But I've been able to I've developed all the rest of the classes. I teach drugs and justice. I teach justice in institutions, which is a class I developed. Justice in popular culture I developed a few years ago. Justice and identity is kind of like my, the sort of thing I was trained for in sociology. It's kind of a sociology course, but I still do sort of a critical leaning toward issues of inequality and injustice, and justice in everyday life. So those 5 classes I teach in a kind of a rotating schedule. But again, because this is an interdisciplinary department, they hire people in different disciplines. They hired me as a sociologist. And there are several sociologists teaching here in the department.
All right.
Anything else?
Nope, I think that's it. So thank you.
You're welcome. I hope that helps.